Welcome back, all my 40K fanatics out there. I'm DJ here with Dims Nation, and today we are going to be talking about a very, very highly requested unit in the comments section, and that is the Necron Doom Scythe. I've actually had quite a few requests to talk about this, and I did do a analysis of the Necron Doom Scythe when it was index time. Well, now we have a codex, and I've had a lot of requests on this unit, the croissant of the Necron dynasty. The Necron Doom Scythe has actually had quite a roller coaster of a career. When it first came out, it was able to be abused in a Chaos Necron allied army known as Chicken and Waffles. The chicken being Helldrakes and the waffle being the, well, croissant. This army had very little infantry and would just use the flyers to fly across the board and absolutely annihilate everything that your opponent had to offer with hard to hit, no pun intended, units that would just not die. That generation and that era was the beginning to what would then be the catalyst to -1s and +1s to hit being limited to -1 and +1. The true villain of that was Eldar and their planes being able to get up to -4 and I believe even up to -5 to hit on some of their flyers. So the flyers would just be impossible to even hit. And that created this kind of concept where since then it does kind of feel like flyers are in a difficult position. And I mean, no disrespect to Games Workshop in this aspect, but it does feel like they are kind of a unit that competitively has a difficult time finding its identity. And hopefully over time, we can start to see flyers maybe get more play and some better representation. But right now, it just feels like flyers kind of fall short. Some of that is due to the aircraft rule, and some of that is due to their general cost and some of their abilities. So let's go into this, and we'll talk about the Necron Doom Scythe. But as always, guys, if you have not subscribed to the channel already, please do. Turn on the bell and get notified on all the content that we bring you here on the channel. These faction-focused videos and talking about units, all the different units that are available in many, many wide variety armies is stuff that I love with this game. This game is there's so much to dive into from a hobby aspect to a lore to gaming. There's just something for everybody. Maybe you're not a fan of competitive play, but you like the models, you like the way the game plays. This can still be a fun game within the right group of people, and as well, just collecting it. You know, this is tangible things. You play, a buddy of mine once described this really well. He would play different MMO RPG games, and he's like, you know, they're fun, but at the end of the day, you just have a digital reward. Here, yes, you have a model, but at the end of the day, that's a model you painted, you built, in something that you have that's tangible. And in some ways, that's really nice. And to me, that's a side of it that appeals to me as a gamer. I mean, anytime I think about not playing Warhammer, I just laugh and go, yeah, this will be a part of my life for a long, long time. Hopefully, fingers crossed, my sons will end up playing too. Because then I got a whole army to practice with. You know, that's how you do it. You have some kids, you teach them to play Warhammer, and then you have your sparring partners. Here, Timmy, you want to play? Oh, you want to play Eldar? No, Dad, I want to play Tyranids. No, you want to play Eldar because they're meta, and I need to learn how to beat them. That's how it goes. All right, Necron Doom Scythe. Well, before we talk about the Doom Scythe, we have to talk about aircrafts because that's what this is. So, being that this is an aircraft, here's a couple of things. When you go to deploy it, you have two choices. You can deploy it as hover, or you can deploy it in strategic. But you can only deploy in hover if the aircraft has the hover keyword. Unfortunately, the Necron Doom Scythe and the Night Scythe, for that matter, do not have the hover keyword. So the Doom Scythe will always be in strategic reserve, no matter what. When it becomes available, so Battle Round 2, when it becomes available, then you follow the strategic reserve rules and place it on the table. The Doom Scythe has a minimal move of 20 inches, so when you do actually go to move it, you have to move it at least 20 inches. Moving it, you move it in a straight line, the exact direction that it's facing, and then at the end of the move, you can pivot it. Previous editions were the opposite way, where you would pivot first and then go into a straight line. now that's going to be kind of rough. I mean, I remember back when with night sights, I would say it's like watching NASCAR when you're fielding night sights on the table. You get on, you move, and you make a left turn. You make a left turn, and then throw them for a mix. You make a left turn. And usually, you're circling the table and just shooting. Other than that, the aircrafts do not have that hard to hit effect. You're really not fighting them in combat unless you have other things that have fly and aircraft. Aircraft are only eligible to fight if within engaged range with one or more unit that has fly. Only models can fly can make a melee attack against an aircraft, and aircraft models cannot pilot or consolidate. Aircraft models cannot declare charges. So all that stuff, what the aircraft is doing is it's being placed, and it's going to just shoot and then move across the table. Now the positive is that aircraft actually do get past some of the line of sight issues with ruins and stuff like that. They are able to basically treat true line of sight at all times. Now, the downside to that is if it's the ostrich effect. If they can see you, you can see them, which means that the Doom Scythe, and for that matter, most aircraft that are being placed on the table, you're going to see them. You're going to be able to see them from wherever you want, whenever you want, and really be able to put the weapons onto them that you want. So these guys are going to get hit. So when you look at the aircraft in that aspect, when turn 2 hits and you place the aircraft onto the table, now you're looking and going, okay, I need to hit and remove something. I need to hit and remove potentially a threat to it, as well as the fact that you want it to survive for longer than just a turn, especially with the points that this is going to cost. So you want it to hit its own personal threat and potentially not get completely destroyed by other threats that may be capable on the table of hitting it. So there's a lot that goes in it. One, we want to look at the toughness. We want to look at the save. We want to look at the wounds. We want to look at all of its defensive characteristic and see how deep does that rabbit hole go. What weapons do we need to eliminate before we're at a safe point and not a risk of losing our expensive flyer? When I say expensive, the Doom Scythe comes in at a whopping 230 points. So let's start with that. So the Doom Scythe has a toughness of 9, a 3-up save with no invulnerable. Within the Hyper Crypt Legion, which is one that I'm working with, it's going to take some finessing. That Hyper Crypt Legion is very interesting. I got still some work to do with it, but it is very, very interesting. You can give it a 4-up out for a command point out of there. 4-up invul. A Spider could give it a 6-up feel no pain. And that's really about it. As far as rerolls for the hits and stuff like that, there might be some strats that I'm overlooking for certain specific dynasties, but or detachments, but I don't really see it. It's not Canoptic, so it won't get it from Canoptic Court. Hypercrypt really doesn't have any outside of characters joining units, which you can't do with that. The Awakened Dynasty, they completely changed up a couple things in there, so at best I think you might be able to get +1 to hit. Still, I think that was a thing, but that's realistically just about it. And the Annihilation Legion, well, it's not a destroyer, so that's not going to work. And then you have the Obscenus Dynasty. I butchered that. You're also not going to be able to they're not really, it doesn't fall into like the Triarchs and the character bases to be able to really gain the boost. There is one that could actually do it, and that is the Silent King. I can't believe I forgot his name. Silent King. Zarek the Silent King does have an aura effect that if you were to bring these in near him, now you can get rerolls to hit. Okay, but now you're taking a 230 point unit and going, okay, but if I put the Silent King in, now I get this boost. So how many are we running? You're running just 1 Doom Scythe? Are you running 3 Doom Scythes? You're running 3. You're looking at 690 points for 3 Doom Scythes, and then the Silent King, you're well into a grand, and half your points right there for just those alone. So, and then yeah, looking at the Awakened Dynasty, you could get +1 to the hit roll with the Phasal Subjugator, which was a replacement for the Cordal, and was making sure that I could still target the vehicle. So you could go into a 2s to hit out of the Awakened Dynasty if he is within 6 of that character that has that. That's not impossible, especially because of strategic reserves. You can position that pretty easily. You can move the character over there. Technomancers have a really good move. So there's a lot of ways around that. But let's go back over into its stats. So toughness 9, 3-up save. Okay, without an invuln. Toughness 9 puts you right at a point where melted weapons now can wound you on a 4. And there's like missiles at a 9, las cannons, they're going to be wounding you on 3s. There is a lot of things that can hit and be able to wound you on 3s that are high level, high damage weapons for less than that cost. On top of it as well, being units that are also more defensive. One that I would throw in comparison to is the Locust Heavy Destroyers. By taking Locust Heavy Destroyers with 3 Gauss Destructors, you're looking at a high strength weapon that has lethal hits, so it could potentially just pass right through. With the inclusion of a Locust Lord, you're looking at 5s to hit or 5s to crit, and a high strength value to be able to wound with these. 2 shots go through, the Doom Scythe is gone. Without the invuln, 2 shots go through, the Doom Scythe is gone. So the durability, I don't feel that it's there. The toughness 9, no invulnerable save. It's and 12 wounds, very, very, very fragile. Without any minuses to hit or anything like that. So realistically, if you have one single Doom Scythe, you need to remove, and you bring this on from strategic on turn 2, you cannot put it in your opponent's deployment zone. So now you need to find your target from the other 66 and a 6% of the table and remove that threat before it removes you. And at toughness 9, that threat column is very, very large. It's not just the Locust Heavy Destroyers with the gauze, it's also all the other 2 damage small arms weapons, because there's no extra defense to go into it. Anything that can proc heavy lethal hits could remove the Doom Scythe relatively quickly. Now, looking over into before we get over into its weapons, let's talk about taking multiple of them. So if you take 3 of them, again, we're looking at 690 points for 3. So how bad is that? Haha, found it. So how bad is it to take 690 points for 3 Doom Scythes? Well, that means you'll have about, like I said, 1,500 points left of your army that will be on the table to play the game. This also means that out of that 690 points, you can only really have 300 more going in strategic. So is that going to be worth it? My initial aspect of it, again, is no, just because of the resilience of them. The resilience is the biggest issue that I see around this model. I think that the Doom Scythe, as we go through more of it, I think the Doom Scythe is actually pointed a little higher than it should be, and not by much. I think its weapons are fine, but its ability leaves a little bit to be desired. I feel like the ability could do better, but it's just that resilience. It's very, very fragile and very easy to eliminate. And because of the fact that this is a chunk of your army that cannot do anything else, can't score can't take objective markers, can't score most secondaries, because a lot of secondaries say excluding aircraft. it hurts to invest so much into 1, 2, or 3. 1, it becomes very easy to eliminate. 2, you're probably at a safer point there, but you lose the 1. And if you lose the 1, then you have 1 left that's not quite going to get the results you want because of some of the random effects of its damage profile and its output. And then if you take 3, you have the heavier chunk, but now you're going to be able to have 2 going into later in the game. So it's kind of, I feel like if you're going to run the Doom Scythe, you're kind of going to get slated into a column where you have to take 3 of them because that resilience with that T9 is so low. Should it have T10? Probably not. I feel like it should have, there should be some type of rule for stealth, like it was the minuses to hit. So, like, I feel like -1 to hit on the turn that a aircraft enters the battlefield would probably help aircraft a lot. This would then allow, to bring them on, have that defense, and then if you take them off the table and bring them back on, cool, you get the -1 to hit again. But if you want to keep those weapons available on the table, then it would kind of give that aspect of this plane is now having to kind of slow down a bit to come lower to the field and make a strafing run, as opposed to hitting its thrusters and flying off the table, circling back around and coming back on the board. So I feel like that's kind of, I think, where the biggest miss is that it's just a little too soft, that T9 hull and only 12 wounds to really survive through, because it's not just the big guns, it's also some of the mid-class guns that can threaten this thing, and it is a high enough bulk of points and a high enough damage that it is worth your opponent's time, and your opponent doesn't have to dedicate as much maneuverability to be able to get to this thing and shoot it down. And we'll talk about that maneuverability and view and everything else when we compare it to a couple other units that Necrons have available, and why the Doom Scythe, I think, just falls down that list a lot more. But let's talk about, there are some positives. I don't want to seem like this is all just negative of like, oh, Doom Scythe, Doom Scythe, Doom Scythe. The heavy death ray is a very interesting gun. So the gun on this thing is a 36-inch range, so good line of sight. We have a smaller table than what was before, so you basically can, again, hit anything you want at any point in time. It is a strength 16, -4, d6 +1 damage. So even through Armor of Contempt and cover, this is still going to put your Marine 3-ups to a 5-up. So right there is good. It's d6 +1 damage. So anywhere from 2 to 7 damage can be dealt with this thing. But sustained D3. This is where the Doom Scythe can be. The Doom Scythe can end a game right here on the spot, or completely just whiff. Sustained D3 means that when you hit a 6 to hit, you get D3 additional hits. So a funny enough story, the first time I ran this thing, I wasn't having very good luck with them. It wasn't doing, one of them did well, one of them failed, and this is where it's kind of built that the belief in my mind is you have to run more of them, because with your hitting on 3s, you roll to hit with 3 shots, you hit with 2, miss with 1. So you need to literally shoot with 2 of them to get one of them to trigger sustained for one of them to be a 6, just on odds. And you're out of those 6 shots, you're still going to miss twice for the 2 guys shooting. So, and then on top of it, because of that, not knowing really, one of them just absolutely fails, and then the other one shoots and does well, and you eliminate that target, that's great. That's why the 2, okay, cool, you counter each other there. But if you have just 1 and it fails, then it gets blown out of the sky and you just wasted 230 points. Now go over into take 2, you come in, you eliminate 1 target, your opponent blows 1 up, and now you have 1 that you're at risk of it failing, and then your opponent blowing it up, and now you've lost 460 points for eliminating only 1 target that may not have really equaled that in points. You take 3, you have 690 points dedicated into it, and you can eliminate, most likely you'll get a good ability to eliminate 2 targets. Is that going to be enough? Is that going to be enough? And is that worth it compared to other choices, which we'll come back to in a minute. Now, one thing that is very nice about the Doom Scythe is that it's not just the Doomsday, the Death Rays for their high damage. Like I said, strength 16, -4, d6 +1 damage is nothing to be shy at. We see it a lot with las cannons. Las cannons do well. The sustained d3, very nice, but is it enough? Now, this has the Tesla Destructor, which also has sustained 2 twin linked. 6 shots, so it's going to get 2 additional hits for each 6. Strength 8, AP0, 2 damage. This has a lot of firepower on it for for what it is, and for considering like some other vehicles and how shots and guns and weapons have been reduced. This thing has a lot of firepower, really, honestly. And if you can get in a position like near the Silent King, that's good rerolls that you could put a decent amount of damage out there for just this character, for just one of these from the Tesla alone. I like the Tesla in general. I like the Tesla on the Night Scythe too. The ability this guy has is the Avastic Instigation. Each time this model targets an enemy unit with its heavy death rays, your opponent must declare if the unit will stand firm or duck for cover. If the unit stands firm when resolving the ranged attack against that unit this phase, a successful hit of 5 scores a critical hit. If it ducks for cover until the start of your next shooting phase, each time a model in that unit makes an attack, subtract 1 from the hit roll. So here's that -1 to hit, possibly. And then a better, when resolving attack, that unit, when resolving ranged attacks against that unit this phase, is successful. Okay, so one thing that's interesting, and actually I'm just noticing now, each time this model targets an enemy unit with its heavy death ray, your opponent must declare if that unit will stand firm or duck for cover. So first of all, it's only the heavy death ray, so you have to shoot the heavy death ray at this unit. If it stands firm when resolving ranged attacks against that unit this phase, a successful unmodified hit roll of 5 scores a critical hit. When resolving ranged attacks against that unit this phase, that means, from my reading, any unit. So your Immortals, your Warriors, your Locusts, anything that shoots at that unit, if your opponent chooses to stand firm, you are going to be you are going to get 5-up crits for everything that shoots at that unit. So even if the death ray fails miserably, other units might be able to pick up the slack if your opponent chooses to do that. The opposite one is if the unit ducks for cover, then next shooting phase, each time a model in that unit makes an attack, subtract 1 from the hit roll. So they're giving that unit -1 to hit for the entire duration of the phase. This is a step up from what we've seen before. And this is definitely, I personally think the only thing this ability is missing and would actually be a beacon in this army is if it also caused the unit to take a battle shock test. I think that would definitely be a huge boost up. But this ability alone is very, very interesting and kind of plays into the column of what you could potentially do with one. This is, how do you put it? This is it's kind of almost the smoke and, how do I put this? You're playing roulette. You're playing roulette with this thing. You bring it on the table. If you play one, bring it on the table and you go, I'm going to target that unit with the heavy death ray. Opponent says, okay. You say, do you want to stand firm or duck for cover? If you stand firm, anyone that shoots at that is going to get 5-ups to crit. So now your opponent's going to think, okay, well, that weapon is pretty strong. So if you do hit me with it, I'm probably going to lose that thing anyway. So, all right, you crit me on 5s, not a big deal. What's the other option? All right, well, you can duck for cover and then get -1 to hit. So now you go into it. Your opponent says, all right, well, I think you're going to destroy me, so I'll just take the 5-ups to crit, and if I make it through, cool, I don't hit at a modifier. And then you flub. Now you don't hit it really well. Now you can shoot at it with other things and get the extra additional crit boost and possibly still eliminate it all the same by getting this critical hit boost. Your opponent says, you know what? I don't think you're going to take it down. I'm just going to go -1 to hit next turn because I'm going to soften the blow on this thing. I'm going to -1 to hit. And then you hit, and maybe you don't do as well. You don't do as good a damage because we're looking at this from the low end of the damage aspect. Because if you shoot and you blow up the model, then no conversation needs to happen there at that point. But now it's -1 to hit, so now you can take your other units and go, you know what? That is weaker next turn. Now I'm going to go focus on other targets. So even though you may not kill with the Doom Scythe, there is some mental plays that you can make with this thing to try to get in your opponent's head about what they can do. So and that's in the single Doom Scythe category kind of for it. And then at the same deal, you know, multiples, if you shoot across the table, you can really put your opponent in a position where they are forced to make a decision. And then you can just do what you want based on those decisions and bring damage to different units in that same sort of way. As well as the fact that whenever you start shooting with each one of those, you know, you shoot with if you have multiple Doom Scythes, you shoot with one Doom Scythe at a target, and your opponent chooses to stand firm, and you get the 5-ups crit. So instead of shooting the next Doom Scythe, maybe that'll go into your Immortals to shoot at, and then you pick up that target. And your opponent goes, "Oh wow, well that really helped." You go, "Okay, now I'm going to shoot the next Doom Scythe at this target." They look at you and go, "Well, that worked out too well. Let's go. I'm going to go -1 to hit." You go, "Okay, cool." You hit, don't do very much. You go, "All right, I'm going to shoot my next Doom Scythe at this target." And your opponent's like, "Okay, well now that's got -1 to hit. All right, I'll go -1 to hit again over here." You go, "Okay, you shoot, you don't really do any damage." Because again, we're putting it on the negative of not doing damage. You hit, you kill, you blow up. None of this matters. So now those two units that were threats are -1 to hit. And now your other rest of your army can go, okay, let's go after some other stuff. Maybe you still want to weaken those things because they're still good, but now it's not as high of a priority chain. So that ability is very interesting and can really get into your opponent's head, and really brings it close to being like, again, like for a competitive aspect of it, that could be some stuff that really you could play into your list with lethal hits, sustained hits, and things like that to play off the Doom Scythes and make your opponent decide. You know, they go, okay, well, I'm going to reduce how much you get for critical hits by choosing to not stand firm. I'm going to duck, recover, and get -1 on everything and survive out the turn. You say, all right, cool. You survive your -1 to hit. Well, I'm going to flop move forward 20 inches, and I'm going to do it again. And what happens is if your opponent tries to wait out through that, eventually those Doom Scythes are going to hit and do some damage. And again, the Tesla is really strong too. And it's 2 damage. So, you know, Marine wants to armor a contempt and cover and stuff like that. They're getting a 3-up save still against that Tesla, and that's 2 damage. That picks up a Marine easily. Now, one of the biggest detractors, like this ability is really, really cool. And there's a lot of awesome ways you can get in your opponent's head with that. The Death Ray can pop off and just, like I said, I played one game that wasn't going very well. And then towards the end, I'm like, you know what? I'm going to Overwatch with that Doom Scythe. And literally, it's on video. It was against Lane, and Lane's Whirlwind drove in front of me, and I rolled 3 6s on the Overwatch. So I got all the sustained hits and just absolutely sent that Whirlwind flying off the table. Didn't win me the game, didn't really score me any points, but you know what? It felt good. It at least felt good. And that's one thing that the Doom Scythes do is they definitely feel good when you roll those 6s for sustained hits. But reliability. And that's an issue that I have right there is some of the reliability. The ability. If you were to tell me that you're playing a list basing it more off the Doom Scythe's ability to for your competitive list and building things around that for what the Doom Scythe can go, that is something interesting that I would like to sit down and talk about. If you are talking to me about the Doom Scythe's guns as far as an anti-tank, anti-big stuff answer, that's when I'm going to start pointing you in another direction. Because if that's your intent, if it's the ability, that's cool. I want to hear about that. Let's discuss that and see what we can come up with there, because that ability is very unique and cool. However, it's still expensive, but cool. But the tank aspect of it, let's throw a couple numbers at you here on this. The Doomsday Arc is 200 points, so 30 points cheaper. The Doomsday Arc can start on the table, which means that you can put it in a defensive position where your opponent has to move, and you can get that good volley of shots off with that thing ahead of time. Doomsday Arc also can get 2s to hit due to sitting still, and the Doomsday Arc is flat 4 damage, so there's not a whole lot to worry about with if you roll a 1 on the damage and end up only doing 2 damage. It is blast, it's heavy, doesn't have devastating wounds anymore like it did before. 72-inch range, but because it is not an aircraft, it can also take advantage of cover and hide behind walls and runes and stuff like that. Strength 18 on the Doomsday Cannon means it's going to be able to wound toughness 9 things on 2s. That's insane. AP 4 and flat 4 damage. So again, it's just flat 4 damage as opposed to having to roll for the random damage characteristic, which I personally like. D6 plus 1 shots means there is a chance that this thing could get 1 less shot than the Doomsday Arc or the Doom Scythe going into a target. But again, with that damage output and stuff, that's more negotiable. And then if it remains stationary, it does get devastating wounds on its Doomsday Cannon. That's where they put it over. Okay, so and if it sits still, you get heavy, so you're hitting on 2s and devastating wounds. So pretty cool there. Canoptic Doomstalker, 135 points. So much cheaper. Canoptic Doomstalker, now again, the weapon strength is going to be strength 14 versus the strength 16 of the Doom Scythe. Okay. D6 plus 1, so again, you do have a chance of having 1 less shot versus what the Doom Scythe will put down. And again, sustained. Sustained can generate more shots as well, too. And if it's heavy, so you can sit still, and then this thing would actually hit on 3s because it's Canoptic, which Canoptic hit on 4s. However, the Doomstalker has a very, very strong home in the Canoptic Court, being able to get basically full rerolls from home field. And then it also has a 4-up invulnerable save. Doomsday Arc, 4-up invulnerable save, 14 wounds. Doomstalker, 4-up invulnerable save, toughness 8, 12 wounds. 4-up invulnerable save. That's the kicker right there. The Hypercrypt Legion does have an ability to give a 4-up invulnerable save. However, I feel like that's something you can kind of play into. Strong and experienced players will try to bait out that 4-up invuln, and it'll be difficult to have that to keep this thing alive, to keep the Doom Scythe alive. Maybe not impossible, but it would be difficult to keep the thing alive. So if you're looking for the anti-tank aspect of it, I would have to push you towards the Doomsday Arc, Doomstalker, or even the Locust Heavy Destroyers. 50 points per model, 150 points for 3. There's your 3 shots. That's a high strength, and that's flat 6 damage. That will just eliminate things easily. So my biggest negative to the Doom Scythe is it looks like an anti-tank. It feels like an anti-tank. It looks like it should be the big guy hunter, and I don't feel like that's its role. Its role is to mess with your opponent's head around this ability and being able to cause things to be minus to hit and this, that, and the other and everything like that. Because the Doomstalker, the Doom Scythe, Locust Heavies, and other weapons like that do still have the ability to hold objective markers, complete secondary missions, and stuff like that with a lower point cost package. The Doom Scythe at 230 points, not being able to really do a lot in the secondary game, and its weapon is just slightly underwhelming for 230 points, makes it kind of a hard sell for me. The ability is a much, much more interesting column that I would like to see more into, because that ability could play well into some things. Still feel like with the ability, you're going to at least want 2 of them. And now we're talking 460 points, which might be a little bit rough. Now, remember, I did say before, the Silent King is also an option to run with these guys, simply on the fact of what his buffs are, because he does have his Triarch abilities. While a friendly Necron unit, so they're good for it, is within 6 inches of Zarek, each time a model in that unit makes an attack, reroll a hit roll of 1 and reroll wound rolls of 1. So he can help. You know, he really can help with that. I remember when I was just circling Doomstalkers around him, that reroll does help. He might be a way to get around it, but then you're looking at Zarek kind of has to play towards table edges and the outside to make sure that he's at least within 12 inches of the table edge, so that they're able to come in and get that reroll 1s to hit buff to really make sure they can hit. And also in that same column, when you're spending 200 some odd points on a Doom Scythe, you're getting kind of close to a Catan there too. It's not the Doom Scythe's fault. The rules are much more intuitive and creative. The ability is definitely much more interesting than we'd seen before. And it is just within 6, so I want to make sure it wasn't wholly within. The rules are definitely a lot more creative for the Doom Scythe. The ability is very, very cool, very unique. I think if there is something there that could possibly be a play, but it's going to be a play of getting into your opponent's head to utilize that best and trying to make use out of that. As far as an anti-tank and anti-armor units, there's a lot. I just feel like there's cheaper and better options inside of the codex that are not only cheaper, but are still able to score those objectives as we go on. But that's just my opinion. Again, my opinion is not law. I mean, I've run some of the craziest things here on the channel, and I've taken crazy things to a tournament that people are like, that shouldn't work, and went 5-0 with them. And then I've taken things that I go to a tournament and say, oh, this is great, this is unbeatable, and then I lose 2 games back to back and go, well, is the bar open yet? So, and that's part of this game. Some of it comes down to, at a tournament setting, especially the matchups and who you may face off against and how your weekend goes, and dice. But going into it and having that best case play, I can't put faith behind the Doom Scythes. It's too much of a risk, too wishy-washy with the way the gun goes. Your opponent does control on what terms these abilities get used. So, yeah, I think that, and I also feel like there's other ways to get that 5-up crit on units, such as Plasmancer or Locust Lord. There's other ways around that, but it's definitely a very unique ability and definitely cool. And I wouldn't mind discussion and talk about utilizing that some more. Again, one man's opinion. I know I just repeated myself in there, but I always feel bad because if like someone went out and bought a Doom Scythe and they thought, oh man, this is going to be great. Look at this, look at that. And then I'm talking it down. Like, don't let me talk it down for you. Run it, play it, enjoy it. Love the model. The model's great. The model's cool. Play with your units. Play with your toys. This is what's about. This game is about. Put it out there. Prove me wrong. Go, hey, you know what? I ran this like this, and because of this, in combination with this unit, it works well. Come back and tell me. I'll throw it on the channel and go, cool. Hey, guess what? There's some play to the Doom Scythe. But on hand, with the book, rules, Heather weapons, I would take the Doomstalker and the Locust Heavies over the Doom Scythe right now at this time. All right, guys, hopefully you enjoyed this video. Like I said, I always enjoy going over different Necron units and going over units in this game entirely. Love the hobby. Love this community. Thank you guys for all the support. And again, I'll talk to you again soon. Thanks for watching.